Welcome to my talk on linear complexity private function evaluation. My name is Marco Holz and this is joint work together with Ágnes, Deevashwer, Rathee and Thomas Schneider. So what is private function evaluation? Let's first consider the standard multi-party computation setting where we have publicly known functions and we have two parties and each of these parties inputs some private data, x1 and x2 in this case. And then these two parties are able to jointly evaluate the publicly known function on their private data without revealing their private data to the other party. And in contrast, in the private function evaluation setting, we have one party inputting some private data x, and we have the other party inputting some private function f. And now the parties are able to evaluate the private function on the private data without revealing their private data or their private function to the other participant. An MPC is a well-studied problem, but private function evaluation is a bit more challenging here, since we also need to hide the functionality of the function f. So we've seen that private function evaluation not only hides the data, but also hides the functionality. And this can be used, for example, for privacy-preserving intrusion detection systems. It can be used for attribute-based access control, and it can be used for privacy-preserving car insurance rates. So for example, in this last setting here, we have a car owner, and the car owner wants to send their data to the insurance company, which now wants to evaluate some function on the data to determine the insurance rate for the customer. But of course, the car owner doesn't want to reveal their data of the car, which could be, for example, location data or any other data. And the insurance company doesn't want to reveal the functionality of their insurance rate computation here. So here we have exactly the setting of one party having some private data and the other party having some private function, and they want to evaluate the private function on the private data without any of the two parties learning the inputs of the other. So hiding the data via multi-party computation is already known, and what's left to do is hiding the function. This is still a research problem that is ongoing heavy work in the last years. So the history of private function evaluation for functionality is represented by circuits of up to G gates. Started in 1976 when Whalen proposed the first universal circuit construction. And a universal circuit is basically a Boolean circuit that is able to evaluate any other Boolean circuit up to a given size of G gates. And thereby the circuit can be thought of, or can be programmed to evaluate any functionality of the input circuit. So then in the last years there followed a lot of research in improving these universal circuits, and these universal circuits can be used for private function evaluation, and we will see how this is done on the next slide. But also there has been some work on oblivious transfer in the private function evaluation setting, and also trusted execution environments have been used to achieve private function evaluation. And in this work, for example, universal circuits are evaluated inside a trusted execution environments to speed up performance. So how does private function evaluation based on universal circuits work? So on the right side here, we have two parties which are taking part in a standard multi-party computation protocol, and these two parties first agreed on a publicly known universal circuit, and party P1 inputs their private input x, and the other party has some private function f, and this private function f is represented by a circuit C, and this circuit is then used as an input to the multi-party computation protocol. And since the universal circuit is able to evaluate any Boolean circuit up to a given size, this universal circuit is then able to evaluate the circuit represented by C on the private data x, And the multi-party computation protocol guarantees that no inputs of the participants, that is the private data X and the private function represented by the circuit C, that these inputs are not revealed to the other participant. So previous work on private function evaluation mostly focused on these UC-based constructions. And it has been shown that the lower bound for Valiant style universal circuits is 3.64 G log G, where G is the number of gates of the input circuit. And this is a proven lower bound, and we can't get any better using these Valiant style universal circuit constructions. And the today's best known universal circuit has size 3 times G log G. And this uses a slightly different universal circuit construction, and this was proposed recently by Liu et al. But the authors also showed that using their universal circuit construction, they have an asymptotic lower bound of 2.95 times G log G, so they also nearly reached lower bounds in terms of complexity. So these findings show that no significant improvements are further expected when we use universal circuits to build private function evaluation protocols. And because of this logarithmic overhead and the lower bounds that have already been reached, there will probably not be any major improvements in this kind of work here at the top. But also there has been some other work based on linear complexity private function evaluation, and this work is based on homomorphic encryption. And the first work here has been introduced by Katz and Malka in 2011, and was later improved to achieve reusability of some protocol parts. And with our work, we continue this neglected line of research, and in our work we show the practicality of homomorphic encryption-based private function evaluation, and we also show that linear complexity based private function evaluation already outperforms these recent universal circuit-based private function evaluation constructions. And we've shown that these protocols are still more efficient, even if they make use of homomorphic encryption schemes. And since homomorphic encryption schemes are currently under active research, we will probably see more efficient homomorphic encryption constructions in the future, and thereby the work on private function evaluation can still be improved, and we see opportunities here for future improvements in this line of research. So in our paper, we researched some optimizations for homomorphic encryption-based private function evaluation with state-of-the-art homomorphic encryption schemes. So first, we implemented the Damgard-Jurek-Nielsen crypto system, and this crypto system has been proposed by the initial work of Katz and Malka in 2011 to be used in their homomorphic encryption based private function evaluation scheme. But we also optimized elliptic curve Elgamal homomorphic encryption for the use in private function evaluation, and we also did a look at the Prakersky van Vergrooteren scheme, which is a lattice-based homomorphic encryption scheme. And in our implementation, we also did some optimizations. We applied some pre-computation techniques, we did some pipelining of all the communication parts, and we also did some massive parallelization of our homomorphic encryption parts of the protocol, because these are the most compute-intensive parts of the protocol. And our benchmarks have shown that homomorphic encryption-based protocols are not only 7 times faster, but also 7 times less communication intense than recent UC-based private function evaluation protocols for 1 million gates. So what are the main challenges of private function evaluation? So first, we have to hide the functionality of the gates of the circuit that we want to evaluate. And in contrast to standard multi-party computation, where AND gates and XOR gates are used to evaluate any possible functionality, in our work we only use NAND gates, and by only using NAND gates we can also represent any functionality of a Boolean gate. And the second challenge is hiding the topology of the circuit. So, for example, remember the Yau's garbled circuit protocol. There, garbling requires the outgoing wires of the previous gates. To be still able to garble the circuit while we don't know the topology of the circuit, we apply some homomorphic blinding and also rearrange these wire keys in an oblivious way. So let's take a look at the protocol of Katz and Malka from 2011. Where we can see how the circuit topology is hidden here. And this slide is thought as a very technical slide, so we'll go into some details of MPC. And again, here we have party P1 holding the private function, and we have party P2 holding the private input X. And party P2 starts by generating some wire keys and encrypting them using homomorphic encryption, and sends these homomorphically encrypted wire keys to party P1. And party P1 can then homomorphically blind these wire keys according to the function f and rearrange them. So this rearranging of the wire keys now represents the topology of the circuit, while the blinding of the wire keys guarantees that party P2 later can't see how the wire keys got rearranged. And then party P1 sends these so-called encrypted garbled gates back to party P2, and party P2 is now able to decrypt these blinded wire keys and generate the garbled circuit as in the standard Yau protocol. And then party P2, as in standard Yau, sends the garbled tables that represent the garbled circuit back to party P1 alongside with the input wire keys, and party P1 is then able to again blind these input wire keys and start evaluating the garbled circuit. And once party P1 has evaluated the whole garbled circuit, it sends back the output wire keys to party P2, which is then able to determine the output of the function f applied to the private input x by comparing the output wire keys to the original wire keys. And for this protocol, we applied some optimizations. So our first optimization is some pre-computation of the encryption of the wire keys. And since this is one of the most compute-intense parts of the protocol, all these encryptions of the wire keys and the encryptions of the blinding values can be done in advance in an offline phase, and thereby the communication and computation in the offline phase is drastically reduced. And also, we applied some massive parallelization in the homomorphic encryption part of the protocol, since all these homomorphic encryptions can be parallelized, and thereby we achieve a large speed up when it comes to runtime. Also, we applied some pipelining techniques to the steps of the protocol, and thereby achieve again a major improvement in terms of runtime. So in our performance comparison, we considered a WAN setting and two servers with 128-bit security setting. And for the communication of the protocols, we measured some universal circuit for gates up to size 1 million gates, and also measured our homomorphic encryption-based protocols with 1 million gates. And there we found that per gate we achieve a way lower communication for our best communication-wise best protocol, which is the elliptic curve Elgamal protocol, and this one is about 7 times faster than, or better than the recent UC construction by Liu et al. In terms of communication. And we also compared our protocols to the multi-party computation setting using standard Yaw's Gabel circuit protocol, and we've seen that we only have an overhead of about a factor of 10 when we compare it to the multi-party computation, where we don't hide the function at all. So hiding the function costs us about a factor of 10 in terms of communication. So here we can see that our elliptic curve-based protocol, which is the yellow line here, is about 7 times better in terms of communication than the best-known universal circuit construction from Liu et al. In terms of runtime, we first analyzed the original protocol of Katz and Malka using this Damgard-Jurek-Nielsen crypto system, which they proposed. And we've seen that this is about 9 times slower in terms of runtime than the best known universal circuit constructors here. And here we compared to the construction of Liu et al., which is not implemented yet, but we estimated the size of the universal circuit and then run the implementation of Al-Hassan et al. To compare with. Also, we have seen when we looked at our improved homomorphic encryption-based protocols that our elliptic curve crypto implementation is about 7 times faster than the best known universal circuit-based private function evaluation, and we've thereby seen that this is really better in terms of runtime than these UC-based protocols, even if we have this overhead of homomorphic encryption. So this is the total runtime of all our protocol steps. And we've also seen that we not only have this factor of 10 compared to multi-party computation, where the function is not hidden in terms of communication, but also in terms of runtime. So we only have our protocols are only about 10 times slower than standard MPC protocols, where no function is hidden at all. So in conclusion, we've seen that linear complexity homomorphic encryption-based private function evaluation is not only asymptotically better than UC-based private function evaluation, but also concretely more efficient, and hence can be considered practical. In our benchmarks, we've shown that homomorphic encryption-based PFE is 7 times faster and has 7 times less communication than UC-based constructions for 1 million gates. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and wish you a nice stay at the conference.